One of the things I want to address is the whole issue of mind control techniques and how this applies to what cults do to control and manipulate their members. And one of the best things that I've found is the information provided in Robert J. Lifton's book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, that was published, the research was done in the 50s, and it was originally done with a focus on prisoners of war and the Chinese re-education programs. And what they did is they went in and they interviewed people who had gone through the re-education programs and took a look at what techniques were used to change people from behaving in one way or thinking in a certain belief system into adopting what the present propaganda was, and in effect controlling what they thought. And out of the research, what he was able to pull out were there were 8 major techniques or criteria that were used to control people's minds and get them to change. And it's really interesting to see how these 8 criteria can be used to take a look at how cults control and manipulate their own members. The 8 criteria initially are milieu control, mystical manipulation, a demand for purity, confession, sacred science, loading the language, doctrine over the person, and dispensing of existence. And what I'll do is I'll go through each one so that you get a better idea of what it is as Lifton defined it, and I'll see what I can do about applying it to how cults use it, and specifically how the cult I was in, the Jehovah's Witnesses, use it. Another thing that they do is the demand for purity. There are a lot of rules about what you can and cannot do in behavior. How you dress, what you eat, what you wear, where you go, how you comb your hair. It was interesting as a witness that at one period of time men were allowed to wear only white shirts. And then they kind of relaxed the rules and men were wearing colored shirts, pastel colors. And then they kind of went, no, you can't wear that. And they were back to the white shirts. Women was always what they considered conservative dress, so skirts around the knee. It didn't matter how cold it was in the winter. Women were not allowed to wear pants when they're in public or going from door to door. And in this way, it didn't really matter what was best for the person, but it was appearances. And so this demand for purity more often addresses the needs of what other people will think rather than the needs of the members of the group. And so the individual gets lost. And about 5 years ago, I went with a girlfriend to an assembly, and just to show her what it was like. And we walked out of there, and she was like, "I can't believe it. They all look the same. You know, all the men are dressed exactly the same. All the women, the dresses are different, but the styles are all the same." And she was just flabbergasted that individuality gets lost. But the demand for purity also goes deeper in instilling a lot of fears about the devil, about being ensnared by people who are non-members of the group, that they may entrap you or encourage you to move away from the organization. There's a lot of guilt that is implanted. And this is interesting because the witnesses will say they're not a cult, but any cult will say they're not a cult. And one of the things that a lot of groups say is, well, we're not a cult because we don't follow people around. You know, people are free to come and go as they please. They've got jobs, they've got lives, they live in their own homes. But the very subtle nature of mind control is that They don't need somebody following you around to monitor whether you're following the rules or not. They teach you to monitor your own behavior and your own thoughts. So you become afraid of doing things because somebody else might see you, but also afraid of your own conscience. And a lot of this is that you don't want to have a conscience that will bother you. So you start obeying all of the rules that they have set in place so you don't feel guilty. And it's not a guilt about, well, I've done something wrong. It's a guilt that somebody else has imposed on you. And, whether I have my skirt an inch above my knee or an inch below my knee, this is not a big sin. And yet, they can make you feel like it is. So you're constantly checking to make sure that your behavior is okay. Another way that this gets acted out is a lot of people these days are into garage sales. Witnesses are really encouraged not to go to these, because you might get something from somebody's home that is contaminated by demons, and therefore wind up bringing that back into your own home. So you become afraid of accepting things from other people. You become afraid of influences from outside, so you limit how much TV you watch, you limit what you get from other people, you limit what you read. Everything becomes, your world just gets smaller and smaller, and the smaller it gets, the more difficult it becomes to have a full life and to be an individual.